Newsmaker Sunday with Fox 10's John Hook.
Thanks for joining us on Newsmaker Sunday. Pleased to have back in the studio David Schweikert, Congressman from Arizona's 6th Congressional District. He was first elected in that 6th district back in 2013, but before that represented Arizona Congressional District 5 from 2011 to 2013. So you've been a veteran around the block now, and you've seen what goes on in Washington. Great to have you on again. It's been a while.
No, you didn't call. I was lonely.
It's good to see you. All right, let's start with Washington as we know it right now.
Yeah.
Is it functioning? Is it working?
Yeah. The reality of it is the productivity from at least the House standpoint of producing legislation, some of it big, complex legislation, we're moving as fast as ever.
Talking about health care?
More than health care. Some of the things going on in the budget building, working on tax reform. I'm blessed to be on the Ways and Means Committee, and we're not doing a tax reform that's just changing a couple rates. We're trying to dramatically simplify the entire U.S. tax code.
How much, when I hear about that, how much blowback do you get from the H&R Blocks and all those kinds of people?
Actually, that's not your problem. It's every group you can imagine that has something in the tax code.
That has a carve-out.
Oh, yeah. And look, a station like this, deductibility of advertising for businesses, down to I had some people stop me in the hallway last week demanding to know what was going to happen for depreciation of racehorses. There's a lot of crazy stuff in the tax code.
Are we ever looking at getting rid of the mortgage deduction?
No. We are looking at sort of dialing it back, but it will never be eliminated. But what would happen if I could take, for an individual, dramatically lower your tax rate, your effective tax rate, and make it so 90% of our population could do their taxes on a postcard, but your only major deductions you get to take anymore will be your home mortgage interest
and charity.
And charity.
Yeah.
That would be a much more rational system.
Why would you need
so
accountants?
Much simpler.
Why would you need accountants?
Well, accountants will still be there for businesses, because businesses will always have complex issues on just managing the business. But maybe they will be accountants that don't spend their lives looking for games in the tax code itself.
Yeah, like your home office and all that kind of stuff.
It's so much more than that. Remember, the tax code's like 68,000 pages, and then thousands and thousands of pages from the IRS interpreting it. 68,000 pages is obscene. How do you make it dramatically simpler so the tax code does really a couple things? It's fair.
Right.
It promotes economic growth, and it's understandable.
And this is your background. For those of you who may not know or are new to the Valley or new to Arizona, David Schweikert was a Maricopa County treasurer for how many years?
Oh, a few years. I was treasurer. Before that, I actually chaired the Board of Equalization.
Right.
And
this is your thing. This is your background.
Look, I sometimes get accused of being sort of math-centric, but you need a few people in Congress that want to make the numbers actually work, because doing public policy by feelings leads to some really dangerous outcomes.
Before we move on to what's happening in Congress right now, or not happening as the case may be, you brought up that, who is talking about the debt and deficit, which you and I talk about a lot on this program. I heard, used to hear Paul Ryan talking about it all the time. Now he's speaker. I'm not hearing any discussion.
Well, here's your world. You're in a Ways and Means Committee meeting. You've just spent 4 hours with some of the world's best economists on how to maximize economic growth through the tax code. You walk out the room, and the microphones that get shoved in your face want to know about President Trump's latest tweet, not about something you were just doing that could change actually the country or change the economic trajectory.
We're getting distracted.
What happens is, I think we're in a world right now where if it's not something you can publish on your cell phone, if it's not shiny, if it's not pithy, if it's doesn't enrage someone, it's actually not news. And let's face it, having me sit down with you and say, this last week, CBO published new numbers.
Congressional Budget Office.
This year, we're going to kiss up close to $700 billion in deficit this year.
Is this Obama?
Deficit.
This is Obama-like numbers?
It's close, but it's more, it's the nature of what's happening with our demographics. But you do realize that's getting close to $2 billion of borrowing a day, every single day. this is a crisis. That number is as big as all the defense or all the rest of the discretionary part of the budget. And they're only about to get larger and larger and larger because demographics, the graying of America, baby boomers are retiring. This is the biggest issue.
And then they go on social services.
Well, Social Security, fine. Medicare is actually our crisis right now because of how much of it, how underfunded it is.
Right.
The Part A trust fund is out of money in just a few years. These are big issues. We can fix them. There's ways where Republicans and Democrats can come together and fix them so we keep our promises.
You and I have been talking about this every time on this program for the past 6 years.
But the moment you talk about them, there'll be some clown out there who thinks they'll get a political edge by lighting themselves on fire and screaming at you or saying, well, if you just got rid of foreign aid, well, the numbers are silly. I mean, every dime of foreign aid is 3 weeks or so of borrowing.
Can you grow your way out of this crisis? Because what I sense in the Trump administration, what they're trying to say is if we could stimulate this economy, get to even 3% growth, which seems not that big of a deal to me, but to get to that number seems to be a big deal, that we could start to grow our way out of this.
Brilliant question. The growth makes everything much easier. You cannot grow yourself out of the unfunded liabilities that are particularly in Medicare. It's just math. But you know, today I believe we're sitting right about 3% GDP if you look at the Atlanta Fed's calculator. That's wonderful. How do you grow a little more than that and then hold it for at least a decade? And we know tax reform, regulatory reform, dealing with the issues within the way certain entitlements stymie workforce participation. I mean, we have to sort of do this all at once. This sort of concept of let's take care of this one little problem here and this. I need a much more holistic approach because if we don't maximize economic growth, a few years from now, we're going to be struggling to keep our promises to our retirees, to people who've paid into programs.
Let's look at, I think it's the president here, tape number 1. Where are we on health care reform? Take a look.
Time is short. Action is required. The world is on notice.
The United Nations Security Council is under increasing pressure from the United States to strongly react to the communist nation's testing of an intercontinental ballistic missile.
There's an interest in condemning North Korea. The question is really the substance behind that rhetoric.
Meanwhile, President Trump landed in Europe this afternoon for the second foreign trip of his presidency. He'll be in Germany Friday for the start of the G20 summit. The 20 heads of state likely to discuss North Korea's latest missile launch, a warhead which flew for 37 minutes.
We cannot be faced with the prospect of seeing a missile being fueled up, knowing that it could possibly have a nuclear warhead.
There is a series of high-stakes meetings for the president in the coming days, including a much-anticipated face-to-face with Russian President Vladimir Putin.
I think he should focus on being president and leave the Russia probe behind in Washington when he leaves.
Meantime, congressional leaders on break for the July 4th holiday running against the clock to agree upon a reformed health care bill ahead of their next recess in August.
Republicans should expect there to continue to be blowback because the plan they've put forward is not better than the system that we have in place today.
Mark Martinez, Fox 10 News.
Okay, we got a little out of sequence there. I was going to talk healthcare. We're going to talk North Korea right now. We've got international issues bubbling up. The president is on a trip abroad. What do you make of North Korea? How pressing of a crisis is this? And is this one of these things? I mean, we've been going on with this for 60 years.
Yeah.
Do we need to act on North Korea? Do we need to jump in and do something?
Caution is probably the better part of valor here. Look, if we go back during the Clinton administration, we thought we made a deal, or the then Congress and President, that we'll give you certain aid, we'll help you build infrastructure, and you won't develop nuclear weapons. We got conned.
We've been conned before.
Yeah.
Iran's conned us.
Oh, yeah. So we have to understand bad actors are bad actors. Do not think they're going to live under Western values or negotiate under them. But we're in a moment right now where China is going to make a huge decision in their lives. Are they actually going to be good international players? And in many ways, North Korea is a proxy state. And are we actually going to step up, and all the companies that are interwoven, the banks out there that allow North Korea to function by washing money, by providing contraband, by even just handling business actions?
Can China alone handle these guys? Because I get the feeling that
They may not be able to handle them, but they could exert enough pressure to at least stop the bad acts.
what's in it for China?
Lots of things. The fact of the matter is, do we have to build a ballistic missile shield in Japan, in South Korea, in the region? So the region ends up becoming heavily armed as the threat continues, which is also seen as a threat to China. So China actually has an upside of saying, if the region is peaceful, you do not need that level of defense capabilities.
Right, and they don't want refugees streaming into their country either.
Yeah, but I must tell you, from sitting in a secure briefing a couple weeks ago, really disappointed. We thought China was going to step up and really start to exert some pressure, and our perception so far is it's been minimal.
Let me know when we get the health care vote postponed. If you can pull that up, Ellis, and we'll run that here. Because I want to get back to where we are on health care. I think people are confused. You guys looked at it, you passed it in the House barely, barely. The Senate's looking it over. They don't have the votes. They've had to shelve it. Do you have that video, Ellis? Health care vote postponed? All right. Donald Trump basically said, we've got to get a deal here. We've got to make something happen because Obamacare is not working. It just is not working. It is failing.
Look, let's just take Arizona, which that's my job, is representing Arizona. In my congressional district, it's less than 2% of the population are in that individual market. And most of what we're talking about is the exchanges. The person that works for themselves.
Only 2% are in these.
Yeah, for the statewide, it's 4. But in my congressional, it's less than 2. So understand, when someone says this is about health care for everyone, it's not. This is a small portion of the population, and then the Medicaid expansion, which for us is called access. So how do you help that plumber, that person that works for themselves, to be able to buy health care? And today,
affordable health care.
Yeah, affordable health care. But what's happened in Arizona? They have a single choice.
Right.
Last year, if you were here in Maricopa County, you had, a 145% price hike. We first have to be just intellectually honest. The model of the ACA isn't working. And it's simple math. What's happened is the young healthy, that 50% of the population that only use 3% of the healthcare dollars, have chosen not to purchase. They're paying the penalties. They're going to
roll the dice.
And that's historic. So what's happened is you have this, what they call a toxicity curve. These are our brothers and sisters who are sick, who need services. But because the price goes up, more drop out. The price goes up, more people drop out. And you end up with this population where 5% of the population, is using 50% of the healthcare dollars.
Wow. Yes.
There's ways to fix it. And that's what we were trying to do in our bill, is what can you do to lower the price dramatically so that young, healthy, that 20, 30, 40-year-olds that use very little healthcare services will step back in and purchase in that individual market. And it's math. And the crazy thing is the rhetoric that's being used is so disingenuous of the baseline facts. But as you see, we're living in a world right now where political theater seems to outweigh actual information.
Is it somebody who I know well, who's in the healthcare world, who was accountant for a big firm that handled healthcare, said the minute you start doing pre-existing conditions and things like that, it's no longer insurance anyway. Well, it's really not insurance anymore.
That may be right, but the fact of the matter is pre-existing conditions are going to be part of everyone's model. That's what's going to happen, because that's where we're at.
But that drives costs up.
It drives costs up. So if we live in a society now that's guaranteed issue, that's what we have. And understand, we've been in a society for 31 years, since 1986, where it was guaranteed services. You walk into the emergency room, they had to provide you service. So the cost is already in society. Here's the tough thing people seem to have trouble processing. The costs are already there. The ACA, Obamacare, didn't remove any cost. Yeah, it didn't. All it did is move around who pays. Our piece of legislation tried to move around who pays substantially by trying to get more participation in insurance pools by cost efficiency. Until you start to do things that actually drive costs down, all we're doing is moving the chairs around on the deck.
Let me ask you this. Was it cheaper to just let people go to emergency rooms?
Probably not. But there's also other elegant models, and I'm incredibly hopeful that if we can get the options in the Medicaid portion for us here in Arizona with our access, going back and setting up, expanding the Maricopa County Integrated Healthcare Systems clinics and doing some more creative things, we might be able to touch more of our brothers and sisters in this state. And remember, we're close to 28% of the state's population in access itself.
Right.
How many of those people could you just touch, saying you don't need to become a full-time enrollee in the system, because we're going to actually sort of move to sort of clinic model for those that need something quick and temporary, or that phone you carry in your pocket. Should someone who's poor be allowed to hit the button and do FaceTime with an RN instead of trying to get in a bus and getting to the hospital or getting to a clinic?
Wow.
There are technology solutions. Sorry, instead of riding medical transport, could you ride in ride sharing? There's these things out there using technology that can help collapse the cost of delivering health care.
We're going to take a break here on Newsmaker Sunday with Congressman David Schweikert, Republican, who represents District 6, which is North Phoenix, Scottsdale, Paradise Valley, Cave Creek. He's been around the block on these budget issues as well, and we'll talk to him more on Newsmaker Sunday when we return. Back on Newsmaker Sunday with Arizona Congressman David Schweikert, represents Arizona's 6th Congressional District, which is Scottsdale, North Phoenix, Paradise Valley, Cave Creek. He's been at this either representing District 6 or District 5 since 2011. Good to see you again. There's some discussion about a gas tax, bringing it back, because we need money for infrastructure, highway funds. You know, we're just starting to get a break at the pump here. It's been nice. And now we're talking about raising a gas tax?
Look, I typically like the idea, if you're going to tax something, do it as a user fee. But you have a math problem. Gas taxes actually don't produce that much revenue.
It's been dropping.
Well,
fuel efficiency, all this stuff.
Yeah, a combination of fuel efficiency in some urban areas, people ride sharing, other things. So if you really want to do infrastructure, if the goal is how do I move my population more efficiently, how do I move products and goods and services, it's a combination of actual new concrete, but it's also technology. Do you ever use something like Waze on your iPhone that tells you when there's an accident? Or those, what would happen if your municipality, if our county, actually the stoplights synchronized according to when this school let out or when this concert let out, our first responders were given a different path, or on freeway on-ramps, the metering actually changed.
Given usage.
Yeah, I'm begging for people to start thinking that infrastructure is more than just more concrete. It's actually crowdsourced data.
I'm glad you mentioned this, because this is my issue with things like light rail. This is not anything new. People get all excited about light rail. This is 1800s technology. This is hardly
it's been around a couple hundred years.
A new idea. And to me, with driverless cars coming, why are we laying track and metal in fixed locations that is not nimble, can't react to these kinds of things that you just discussed? Why are we going down that road and spending billions on this stuff?
And look, and the very controversial studies of because light rail actually clogs up intersections.
That's right.
And cars idling, that in many ways light rail is not particularly good for air quality.
And it's not clean. But it's on the grid.
But
these are electric trains.
But there's the classic problem of Washington. Let's just do public policy. I've come to the conclusion, and forgive this sounding a little cruel, it's always about the money. The number of times we will get lobbied saying, we want money for this. Oh, by the way, our business does that. Or our organization makes money on it. So you often have to take a step backwards and say, when we start thinking about infrastructure, our community, what would move people and products more efficiently and keep our community, our air quality and those things healthier? Is it a combination of where we need to put some new roads? Absolutely. Dealing with the fastest growing county in the country, you're going to need new roads. But also an overlay of technology. And that's hard because for a lot of the folks that come lobby you, they haven't figured out how to make money on the technology yet. So they often go to where you can hire a bunch of engineers and other folks. And it's cynical, but it's reality.
Do you believe health care will get done?
Of course.
It will get done.
Sure. But the math problems are health care. You got to be careful what we're talking about. If you're talking about the ACA, Obamacare, it really is only two things. It's those people purchasing in the individual market and Medicaid expansion.
Okay.
But I can't tell you the number of folks who will contact my office. And my favorite one is a woman that works for the city of Scottsdale. And somehow she thought we were doing something that affected her health care package as a city employee. Yeah. And she had an email from an activist group that functionally said so. Completely false. It would be so much easier to work on policy if you actually had a population around you that actually were bathing in the actual facts. Look, you saw the CBO report saying 22 million. 22 million are going to go uninsured. But break down the number. About 15.5 million of that 22 are just choosing not to purchase. They've been given freedom of choice.
And they're not taking part.
But then take the remaining, let's call it 7 million. CBO will not give you credit for people that buy catastrophic policies, or buy health service contracts, or buy some of these more religious-based contracts for their health care. So if you actually look down, the actual number is pretty small. And the elegance of that is, if the number's small, we can find a path.
It's easy to do.
We can deal with it.
One more thing before the break. Can tax reform get done in this Congress?
We don't have a choice. Reality of it is, if we do not do some things to accelerate economic growth, we cannot keep the entitlement promises that this country has made.
This is a coming crisis.
So you have to sort of think of this in a holistic fashion. We need to do the tax reform. I'm blessed to be on the tax writing committee, and it's day and night. So think of like August. People think of August as a vacation, but if we're on Ways and Means, we will be grinding through August. Now, it may be sitting in front of computers and teleconferences making the numbers work, but
the work will still go on.
But I believe we're going to make tax reform happen.
David Schweikert, Congressman, Arizona Congressman from District 6, our guest. Back in a minute. Final thoughts on Newsmaker Sunday. Final moments with Congressman David Schweikert. We've talked about a lot of kind of meaty policy issues. Are you a Trump guy?
I see the president as a populist. He's hired some absolutely terrific staff. One of my best friends is OMB director. So I don't know if it's fair calling me a Trump guy, but I must tell you, a lot of the policies coming out of the White House are terrific.
His instincts you think are right.
Yeah, and the fixation on how do you make America grow? How does everyone get a fair chance to have a decent paycheck and have an opportunity? And you've got to reward that, because that's what we need as a country.
This talk about impeachment and removal, is there any reality to any of this?
The simple reality is when you get the email about impeachment and there's that asking you for $50 at the bottom of the email, it's about the $50. Look, much of this craziness is actually about political money and political power. And what breaks my heart is so many folks who have angst about the president or other things are getting played.
Are you glad that you have done this? Or have you grown frustrated? Matt Salmon, for one, grew frustrated with the process.
I was hoping no one would ever ask me that. If I had to go back in time, I wouldn't have done this.
No kidding.
No kidding. But it's been the single most interesting thing I've ever done in my life.
Does it leave you optimistic or pessimistic?
Yeah, I'm incredibly optimistic. But I also understand there's some brutally difficult things that must be done. And whether you're on the right or the left, you got to understand what's happening in the math.
Is it up to the president to make the public?
No, I actually think it's up for the public to step up, push aside the noise, and start understanding the debt and deficits that are crashing in on us.
Thank you. Good to see you again.
Thank you.
Really appreciate it. Congressman David Schweikert. We'll see you next week on Newsmaker Sunday. Come back.